Plebes unum presentas Elecciones presidenciales en la historia mexicana. The 18th official presidential election in Mexican history took place on July 2nd, 2006. Vicente Fox ran a populist campaign and ended the PRI's reign over Mexico. What did he do with the power he now had? Mostly continue Mexico's neoliberal policies, but shift them further to the right. The beginning of his tenure was mostly defined by failing to institute a value-added tax in Mexico, failing to build an airport in Texcoco, and the creation of the free trade area of the Americas, which made him have a rocky relationship with Cuba, Venezuela, and Bolivia, and covering up the death of the journalist Digna Ochoa. The latter half was mostly defined by his conflict with the head of government of Mexico City, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, where Fox tried to impeach him and remove his civil rights, which would include voting rights and his right to run for public office. But after 1 million people came to Obrador's support, Fox dropped the charges. Why did he try to do this, you may ask? Well, it was supposedly to help a guy who wasn't properly reimbursed for federally purchased land. There was another reason why he did it, which you may or may not know at this point. In the 2003 midterms, the PRI had to retake in the Chamber of Duties. With all that out of the way, let's move on to the election itself. First, we'll start off with two new parties that arose between the last election and now. First was the Social Democratic and Peasant Alternative Party, which was a reformed social democracy, which had now defined itself as a party of the new left and had a platform of legalizing same-sex marriage, euthanasia, decriminalizing certain drugs, and ending the influence of the Catholic Church. Activist Patricia Mercado ran as the candidate. She ran under the slogan, "A Woman's World." The other one being the New Alliance Party, a liberal political party that split from the PRI. They ran former Chamber of Duties member and lawyer Roberto Campa as the candidate. He ran under the slogan, "1 out of 3, which was referring to him wanting people to give one of their 3 votes in the election to the New Alliance Party. Speaking of the PRI, that PRI exit occurred over the presidential primary. Roberto Madrazo, who was now the leader of the PRI, was running for the nomination a second time, and many PRI members tried to run an insurgent campaign against him as a group called the Democratic Unity. They ran Governor of Mexico State Arturo Montiel as their candidate, but he quickly dropped out due to embezzlement charges. There was another opposition candidate in former Assistant Attorney General Everardo Moreno Cruz, but ultimately Madrazo ended up being the nominee. He ran under the slogan, "Moving Mexico to get things done." Madrazo also formed a coalition with the Mexican Green Party after they broke with the PAN. The coalition was called the Alliance for Mexico. Hey, wait a minute. While we're on the subject, what was the PRD up to? Well, it was assumed that Cardenas would run for the presidency a 4th time, but before the PRD would hold an official presidential primary, they would hold an internal party poll to see who actually has support amongst the party members. The internal party poll showed that another member of the party was supported by 90% of the party, that person being Andrés Manuel López Obrador. I'll be using his nickname AMLO from here on out. Due to that, Cardenas decided not to seek the party's nomination, and AMLO ran unopposed. He formed a coalition with Convergence, a rebranded Convergence for Democracy, and the Labor Party, called the Coalition for the Good of All. He ran under the slogan, "For the good of all, the poor are first." And lastly came the PAN. Following the successful overthrow of the PRI, they got reinvigorated to run a very serious campaign. There were 3 people who sought the presidential nomination: former Secretary of the Environment, Alberto Cardenas Jimenez, former Secretary of the Interior, Santiago Creel Miranda, and former Secretary of Energy, Felipe Calderon. Now, despite the fact that Miranda was endorsed by Vicente Fox, Calderon ended up winning the nomination. They did not have a coalition this election and ran under the slogan, "So we can live better." Oh, silly me, I forgot about the candidacy of Dr. Simi. Okay, let me explain. Mexican businessman Victor Gonzalez Torres decided to initiate an independent presidential campaign as the mascot of his pharmacy chain, running under the slogan, "To serve God and the people of Mexico." However, independents were not allowed to run for president, so he had to run an unofficial write-in candidacy. All that really happened with his candidacy was that he tried to enter the debate, even bringing his own chair, and he tried to claim the title of the cheapest candidate in the race due to his self-financed campaign, but courts ruled that Mercado was the officially cheapest candidate. I just thought it was like a fun little tidbit. The campaign was seen as another two-person plus one race, but not who we expect. You see, the PRI was now coming in third in all of the polls, so it didn't look like he would be a major factor in the race. So much so that Madrazo even stated that the PRI was open to merging his coalition with AMLO's. AMLO said that he wanted to keep his message pure, so that was not going to happen. AMLO faced scrutiny from both sides of the political aisle. He faced scrutiny from the left for including people such as Manuel Camacho Solis in his campaign when Camacho was not a leftist. Zapatista leader, Subcomandante Marcos, even flat out claimed that AMLO was a false leftist. Meanwhile, the right wing of Mexico likened him to Hugo Chavez, even claiming that Chavez was distributing pro-AMLO propaganda in Mexico in an effort to sway the election. Now, despite the fact that AMLO was the slight frontrunner of the bunch, he neglected to participate in the first presidential debate. The remaining candidates decided to leave an empty chair on the stage to signify his absence. The consensus following the debate was that Calderon was the winner, Mercado was a pleasant surprise, Campa did well, Madrazo was the overall loser, and AMLO should have been there. The second debate was more of a mixed bag. Some media groups saying Calderon won, some saying the winner was AMLO, which was very similar to the polls. Some said AMLO was the winner, some said Calderon was the winner, but it was pretty clear it was these two and everyone else was just there. And here are the results. Well, there's an interesting debacle. You see, on the night of the election, the race was too close to call. Well, I mean, unless you were Calderon and AMLO, who both called themselves the winner of the night. But media groups and the official election center could not do so. It didn't help that this would be the first time Mexican citizens living abroad could vote in the presidential election. The preliminary results that were being counted showed AMLO leading by decimals for a while, but as soon as the results got to 98% of the vote, Calderon jumped to a 1.04% lead. Pretty soon, the official results came in, and the results were Calderon winning with 35.89% of the vote, AMLO with 35.31% of the vote, Madrazo with 21.26% of the vote, Mercado with 2.7% of the vote, and Campa with 0.96% of the vote. AMLO criticized this as there were many voting irregularities across at least 30 states, and he would push for a full recount. This debacle continued for 2 months, even having the EU get involved to help solidify the results. Eventually, a partial recount was done, which had 6% of the votes counted invalidated. AMLO saying that this is more evidence that there should be a full recount because the results just kept putting them closer and closer. The EU had published a report officially recognizing Calderon as the winner, but also gave suggestions for electoral reform to prevent this from happening again, including moving to a top two runoff style like other Latin American countries, and very openly clarifying what would constitute a recount. In November of that year, AMLO held a rally of supporters to declare him the legitimate president of Mexico and announced plans to build a shadow cabinet to exert political pressure on Calderon's actual cabinet. Will Calderon institute any of these reforms that were suggested? Will this be the end of AMLO's political career? Well, te veré para las próximas elecciones, amigo. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and click that bell to be notified when a future video of mine comes out. And if you're interested in more content from me, you can go to my website or follow me on Facebook, Twitter, or Quora, follow my Discord, or check out my articles on the Independent Political Report.